Gloomhaven Tales by Candlelight Part 2 The East Road. Morning came with the squawks of gulls that littered the foggy pier and skies over the merchant's bay. It was a dreary morn, with few citizens wandering the streets after the unwholesome storm the night before. Our mercenaries were up early, having restocked on provisions with what little coin they had left from Gundros, the ominous stranger full of fine promises. Before they left Gloomhaven, they perused the wares available to them by a crooked merchant who peddled in merchandise which were frail and in a sad state of disrepair. But these things mattered little, of course, when one could exaggerate qualities and rarities to those unfamiliar. Fortunately for them, Hex was no stranger to detecting shoddy contraptions, trinkets, and baubles. It was a cloudy mid-morning when our adventurers set out upon the east road, beyond the patrolled walkways and hardened gates. The disgruntled guards snickered and whispered as they passed. Some called out to them, wishing them fortune on the road, but with a blunt, sarcastic undertone, implying the mercenaries were bound to end up dead or lost, like so many of them who had braved the roads before. Their path first took them through abundant, thriving fields of wheat and rye, much of the crops having been melded with the muck after the torrents of heavy rain. They passed solitary wooden homes, undoubtedly the abodes of herbalists or hermits who prized such privacy above much else. The east road itself was rather barren that day. It deviated little, taking the pair towards human settlements and villages. Here, the sounds of life became much more evident. Farmers and herders were out early. Animals grazed the beckoning greenery of the wide plains outside their pens. The mercenaries could hear the curses of men and women who had forgotten to bring in their clothes, still hung on lines during the storm. The young and elderly ignored them as they enjoyed the cool morning breeze. The pair walked for hours as the sun crept higher into the sky. Clouds parted, letting streams of golden rays bathe the dirt road and the surrounding plains. They passed rusting, disused machinery and discarded carts by the side of the road, but nothing matched their quarry as of yet. They took brief rests to recuperate throughout the uneventful journey, and by the following day, they had reached a fork in the road. One continued west towards the capital, while another twisted north, dubbed the Stone Road. They pressed on west, inching ever closer towards Dagger Forest. They started to encounter more abandoned homes and smoldering farms, destroyed windmills and failed water wheels. Arrows and brittle weapons lay scattered about carelessly, painting a picture of the frequency of raids and looting in those parts. As they journeyed further along the east road, they heard the faint sounds of rushing waters from the Serpent's Kiss River to the south. They crossed an unassuming dirt path covered in fallen leaves when they heard a loud click. Without warning, a large net shot out from under the leaves, hoisting the quadrille upwards as she squealed in alarm. The rope net under the savas instead snapped, unable to lift it up against its weight. Hex panicked as she noted that her backpack had tipped open, the canister she so curiously studied lying on the dirt road beneath her.
"Oh dear, you ought to watch where you walk,"
came a voice from the copse of trees to their side. The owner was a human, a man who strolled confidently towards the scene. He was tall and slender, an unmistakable smirk hidden beneath a wide-brimmed black hat with plumes of fanciful feathers evident in its corner. He wore upon his chest a dark green, long-sleeved cotton shirt with a blue-black padded waistcoat that seemed to match his rather elaborate hat. His breeches were of a dusty earthen brown, as unappealing as his pair of muddy black leather boots. By his waist were small concealed pouches. He tipped his hat towards the quadrille, who thrashed helplessly.
Hey! What is this? Brim! Help! Get the canister! Get the canister!
She said, watching the man approach. The Savas placed its backpack by its side. It grumbled, ignoring both the man and the likely useless canister, instead focusing on trying to free its companion from the rope net. The man chuckled and crouched, ignoring the Savas in turn, as he scooped up the canister. He eyed the quadrille. He had sharp, thin eyebrows, a rather crooked, pointed nose, and a clean-shaven, chiseled jaw. One might have considered him a highwayman or a mere brigand, but they do not often go to extreme lengths to don fanciful garments.
Hey! Drop that! Brim! Don't let him!
Worth some coin,
said the man, looking over the canister.
Back away, human.
Brimstone regarded him bitterly as it worked at tugging at the ropes.
Oh my, you're an unsightly creature, aren't you? Anyone ever told you the two of you make an odd pair? Well, at least the looks are a thing in common,
Give that back! If you know what's good for you.
Well, see, the thing is, I don't. So don't mind me, I'm just gonna...
said the man as he reached for Hex's backpack between the holes of the rope net. He was obviously not intimidated by the Savas or its seemingly defenseless, immobilized companion. The power core in the chest piece of the quadrille suit lit up as she adjusted the brace on her right forearm. The Savas grabbed the man's outstretched arm and turned to him, a mix of anger and annoyance.
Whoa there, Stoneface.
The man deftly reached into one of his pouches with his free hand and retrieved a small circular orb of glass that fitted easily in his palm. Before Brimstone could react, he smashed the orb onto the rocky forearm, releasing vapors of blinding smoke. It backed away, sputtering and relinquishing the assailant's arm. In its distraction, the man grabbed Brimstone's backpack instead and bowed to the group as he backed away.
Ought to pick your fights well, mates. Be seeing you fellas around.
He remarked boldly, turning away. But as he did, there was a whirring and a deafening click. The man made a half turn, only to catch a glimpse of the net that darted at him from the quadrille's net shooter. It sent the man hurtling forward, and the heavy net bound him onto the dirt and leaves as he writhed helplessly. The force had sent his fanciful hat tumbling far out of reach.
What is this? Oi! Get me out of here!
Brimstone brushed aside the remnants of the smoke and gave a forceful tug once more at the rope, snapping enough that Hexoculus was freed. She walked over triumphantly, resetting her bracer, and stood by the man. Brimstone approached and retrieved its backpack.
Hey, you didn't take that Stoneface thing seriously, did you? Come on now, get me out of this thing, pals!
He squirmed. Hex retrieved her canister and looked up at the Savas, who had a half smile for once. Brimstone clapped its hands together and gestured. The air around them shifted uneasily. In moments, a small contained dust storm was upon the man, leaving him blinded and sputtering himself.
No! Get me out! No! My hat! My hat! Oi, help!
His cries grew distant as they left, and in time night was upon our mercenaries. They were seated around a campfire as the dark canvas above them was peppered with the glow of hundreds of brilliant stars, brethren to the solitary pearlescent moon that bathed the plains around them. Heck studied her pondering companion as it watched the flames. The chirping crickets and buzzing flies were the only company they had that night.
Brim, I've been curious. I mean, you're sort of private, and sometimes I feel we barely know each other. So I've been meaning to ask, how'd you become a mercenary? Are there many Savas that do this? And your chest, it's different from some of the others. It's not made of glass. Was this an injury or...
Not much to say.
Oh. Well, what was it like where you're from?
The Savas shrugged, silent as he stared at the crackling wood.
I sometimes miss home. I miss the whole eastern continent for that matter. You must feel the same way about home, right, Brim?
Yes.
The Savas replied with a bitter sigh, its emotions clearly bottled, hidden away.
Finally!
She chuckled, getting a genuine response from her companion.
Do you have friends there? Family? Your people, they must be...
They don't know or care where I am. I would be unwelcome.
Its words halted hers in an instant. She paused.
Oh, sorry, Bram. Are you alright?
The Savas did not reply. It merely leaned against the tree behind it and shut its eyes. Heck sighed apologetically, retiring for the night by the warmth of the flames. Brimstone had a restless night, as its mind raced, flooded with memories and regrets of its homeland. By midday the following day, they passed the Hedwin settlement, a human mining village which was surprisingly unlike many of the others in the area. They went about their day, their homes not pillaged and their fields left unburnt. Perhaps they had a stroke of good fortune, or learnt to defend themselves as many had to in those parts. As they passed by, several curious children ran up to the entrance of the village. Some merely gawked at the pair. The braver and arguably more foolish children decided it would be prudent to scare off the mercenaries or even intimidate them. They grabbed rocks and hurled them at the Savas's imposing figure.
Haha, go away, you monster!
Called out a rambunctious boy with little regard for consequences.
Oi, you'll make it bad!
Squealed another. The quadrille turned, surprised and annoyed at the harsh children. A young girl screamed in fear at having seen Hex, yelling dramatically about her looks. Brimstone motioned for her to keep walking, for he was in some ways used to such treatment.
Oi, get away from that thing!
Yelled a mustached man finally, ushering the children back. He gave the mercenaries a disgusted look until they were out of sight, as though they were to blame for frightening children. Soon they came upon deep tracks made along the dirt road, undoubtedly made by a wheeled vehicle like a cart or carriage.
There.
There was a skittish neigh as an emaciated lone horse trampled back and forth, seeming oblivious to the pair. There were traces of blood on its fur, not its own.
What's wrong with it?
It's spooked.
Their eyes wandered along with the twisting tracks, which veered off the main road and into dagger forests. Through the shrubbery, they saw a warped, broken wooden wheel buried beneath dirt and twigs. Hex made some adjustments to her bracer defensively. There was a shift in the winds and a slight but unmistakable rumble in the earth as Brimstone focused.
Be wary. These parts are never safe.
It said as they ventured deeper into the underbrush. Gnarled roots, twisted, hollow trees, and a myriad of vegetation were passed as they followed the trail of apparent destruction further and further. They kept their eyes vigilant, their ears cocked for the faintest of sounds.
Brim, look!
Overturned, lying in a silent grove ahead, was a large wooden carriage. It had collided into an old oak tree. Weeds had started to latch onto various corners of the enormous transport. As they neared cautiously, they caught sight of barbed arrows protruding from its sides.
Ambushed.
Vermlings?
Or inox.
Said the Savas, studying the arrows up close. The quatrail dusted some leaves off the carriage and saw the same carving along its side of the 5 crossed daggers described by Gundros.
This is it!
Let's just find that package and get out of here.
Hex had to climb atop the transport to access its door. As she opened it, a pungent stench wafted out. She stifled a squeal as she shielded her nose. The corpses of a man and woman were left rotting within, arrows similarly lodged in them both. The looks of horror were still displayed on their contorted, lifeless faces. Hex detected Brimstone's urgency, and hence she did not whinge. She hurriedly searched the bodies. The Savas climbed into the back of the carriage. There was little there apart from pickaxes and ropes and sacks that looked like they had been emptied carelessly. As Hex moved the bodies aside, she saw a contraption built into the edge of one of the seats. It took her moments to study and understand how the mechanism worked. Using what little she had on hand, which was one of the arrows she promptly had to dislodge from a corpse, she jammed the metallic bit into the circuitry. There was a sudden spark and a grinding that followed, but Hex was safe. The gears rotated one after the next, not without its fair share of noise. Finally, the seat of the driver split open and parted by way of the machinery. Beneath was a package, the very package that they sought. It was, as Gundros said, small, rectangular, 5 crossed gold daggers.
Hey, Brim! I got it!
Good. Let's go.
Hex jumped out the front excitedly with the package. Then there was a pause.
Brim? I think I figured out which one of us was right.
Brimstone climbed out of the carriage following the ominous statement and joined its companion. With a heavy sigh, there were at least half a dozen Inox covered in traces of blood-red war paint and wearing ragged tribal clothing facing the pair. They wielded crude weaponry, notched drawn bows and bloody cleavers. Necklaces of teeth and visible trophies fashioned of bone made their circumstances all the more unsettling. It was unclear if it was a trap or the mere noise that drew their attention, but one thing was for certain: they would not let prey go so easily.
So, we're just gonna go now.
Said Hex, her words ending with the whizzing of an arrow that was let loose. The barbed missile soared, piercing through the air, intent for her head. Next time on Gloomhaven Tales by Candlelight.
They have been after us plenty.
It's too late. You've doomed us all.
I think we should go our own ways.